Well, Griffin, thank you for doing this.
Of course, Jen. We're talking about you here.
Okay, so here's where I want to start. I want to understand. So, first of all, you and I sat next to each other and hung out on set for 3 years. And you told me so many incredible stories. And only one story you told me on set is in this book. And there are so
Oh,
many stories in this book. Like,
which one
the story
made
about
it?
when you were driving for the first time, you kind of like stole the car, and then there was all the police, and you thought that they were all coming after you, and it was because of the Tate murder had happened, and it was like the crazy timing of how that all aligned in your life. So that was the only one though, and I thought, man, you've lived such a sprawling life in terms of the amount of things that have happened, and you have this literary mind of how you think about and articulate the things that have happened to you. So, how do you figure out where to begin a book like this?
Um, writing a book was on my bucket list. Um, and I had been thinking about it for some time as my immediate family just got older and started to pass away. I was the I was the one who really paid attention
Mm.
and remembered stuff and had noticed that the things that happened in our family are don't happen to everyone, but that it's still a family with all the joys and ups and downs and dysfunction of many other families. And that not just my immediate family, but the generations previous and my parents' parents.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd be writing when I did a proposal that went to all the publishers to and then had the Zooms talking about people who are interested, the ones that are interested. I pitched it as a sort of Sedaris Me Talk Pretty one day kind of book, which was, stories like you just heard, but, anecdotal chapters with overlapping family members that would be, for the most part, funny, but also like Sedaris, then moments of real heartfelt stuff.
Yeah.
What what I didn't anticipate was that I'd write it chronologically.
Mm.
And when I did, based on the stories, again, that I was the only one who still had them and could pass them on,
Yeah.
of my crazy great grandparents and grandparents and their adulterous, alcohol fueled, reckless lives that are also really funny. Um, so, I just had to get it down. It was up to me. And then I started to write, when I started writing chronologically from starting with the Mexican Revolution on my mother's side, with Pancho Villa driving her side of the family to Nogales, Arizona, border of Mexico, and then the Great Famine in Ireland, with my father's side. I just kept on going, and I was obsessed.
Mm.
And when we were doing This Is Us, I would go back to my trailer when they turned the camera around and pick up a sentence right from where I left off. I mean,
Wow. We had
I
no
was,
idea. You didn't tell anybody. I had no idea.
I'm one of those, if you talk it, you let the air out
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of.
I agree. I agree. I totally subscribe to that.
Mm.
That's wild. So, all right. So, was there an event that kind of was like, okay, this is the time, or it was just that building, that mounting pressure that you held the stories and you just needed to like actually push through and do it?
Um, yeah, not a specific event. I forget what it was that I would have started sooner, but I was putting it off because I couldn't write it. I never knew what the title was till the last minute, but I always
Mm.
knew the subtitle was A Family Memoir. And I knew I couldn't write it without my brother's blessing, who was the last one standing,
Oh, interesting.
who, who is fine now and has been for years and years. But at the time I was going to focus on in the book, he had a period of mental illness, of being bipolar, um, and I had to do that. So I was dreading making that call to ask for permission because quite honestly, I didn't know if I would if he said no, but he did say yes. And he, with a caveat, um, you can write whatever you want about me, just have it come from a place of love.
Hmm.
And it was the perfect note that just passed, that extended to everyone I wrote about.
I was gonna say, I feel like that feels so present in the whole
Yeah.
spirit of the book, that there is a lot of grace and there's a lot of love held for everyone.
Yeah. And that was that. And it also gave me the freedom to like get into, you know, tremendous flaws in people's characters, particularly my own, that would go throughout it because, I knew where the story ended. I knew the kind of man that my father, after, you know, years of struggle, I knew the kind of man he became,
Mm.
and had, incredible admiration for my mother and aunt and uncle. And so I could always write about, the darker times and the more confusing times and the weaker times, in
Yeah.
character.
What do you, when you had to write about the darker stuff and losing your sister and all that, like, what do you do to kind of protect yourself? Because that's a lot. You'd already gone through it, not only gone through it, but then re-went through it in the trial. It's so traumatic. I would have, I think if I were in your shoes, I would have been very scared to go through all of it again mentally. Did you feel like that was scary, or am I wrong and it was more cathartic,
Well,
or?
well, again, when I sold the book to Penguin, I really thought that I would deal with the trial and murder in a chapter,
Mm,
maybe an overlapping two chapter.
mm-hmm.
When I started so far back chronologically and went through my parents' childhood, imagining that, and then, my own, and I watched Dominique get older and older. I went, oh my God, I see this big dark tunnel coming up.
Mm. Oh,
Didn't think I was going to. And if I go into that tunnel, I'm going to come out the other side, and it's going to be a long ride. It's going to be,
yeah.
and I'm just going to just plow ahead and try to remember everything, because one, in honor and of her memory, I'd already established the kind of person she was, of what a great sister, and her love of animals and her incredible talent as an actress,
Yeah.
uh, that I now had to go into her loss and the incredible injustice of that trial.
Yeah.
And, it's a rather well-known trial for just how fucked up the verdict was, which was three and a
Oh,
half years
yeah.
ago. And it allowed me to talk about things that, while I've been promoting the book, talk about that's so much more than, selling the book is, um, people are really responding to the issues in the book of domestic violence
Yeah.
and of the court system and of victims' rights, which both my parents, from different angles, were were serious activists in that, on that issue.
Yeah.
Um,
Like,
and so I felt a sense of purpose, going into it. And I never, and a long answer to your question, but I never had the, oh, this is too difficult to write about moment. I was more writing it as the memories flooded in, and as I, you know, rekindled my memory by going to my father's archival papers
yeah.
about the trial. I was typing, and every now and then I'd take a break and go, I cannot fucking believe that happened. I
Yeah.
cannot.
It
And
just,
then I would go back in.
yeah, it doesn't, I mean, it really doesn't feel possible. It's
Yeah.
just so, all of it is so intense and terrifying. I mean, both the murder and the result with the trial,
Yeah.
in terms of just like, it's just crazy.
So
Um,
it was a mission of
yeah.
Schwartz without getting too heavy-handed about it,
Yeah.
that I did not know. I had no idea how it would end, where I would end the book while I was writing it. And when I got to a certain point, I just knew. I got
Mm.
goosebumps. I went, oh, wow. Open with life. I mean, open with death and with life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was it.
If you guys enjoy this podcast, I'm going to do that thing that I thought I would never do and say, please, please, please like or subscribe to our show. When you do that, it tells everyone that we can keep making these episodes for you. It indicates that you're enjoying the show, that it's something that's worthwhile for us to do. We love talking to these authors. We love giving you access to these authors, and we love getting inside their minds and giving you a little sense of exactly how they approach their creative process. So if you feel so moved, please, please like or subscribe to The Bookshelf with Jennifer Morrison.
Do you have like just in more of like a craft perspective and not so much the content, but the actual craft of it? Like, so you go back into your trailer, you have your moments at home, and you're going. Like, is it just sort of a free flow and you go back and you sort of edit it, or does it come out of you pretty close to what it ends up being on the page?
It did come out fairly close to what was big on the page. What surprised me that I could get away with without having to be calculated about it or making a stylistic choice was how I could go in one direction in the present tense of the past,
Mm.
and then sort of effortlessly jump forward to
Mm.
something that reflected on the moment I was talking about, 40 years later,
Yeah.
and then pick up the thread again. And I don't know where that came from, but it just sort of happened. And I thought, I wonder if my editor is going to go, oh, that's not allowed, or something like that. But he didn't. And it's a device or something I found on my own, just sort of organically, that I'm very sort of pleased about. That and it has that way all the way through. But I would also, you mentioned all these stories and only one of them made it in the book.
Yeah.
I also had at least 150 pages that did not make it in the book, only because it took throughout the balance of the ensemble of family members.
Mm.
If I did, too much of one, too much of Hard Times of Dad, and too much of, mental challenges of one, and it was more about editing, which is, I'm sure you've heard from your other writers who you've interviewed, is actually the most fun part.
It's also it's a very unique relationship between every writer and their editor. Like, was it someone that you had known before, or
No, it was
how did
someone I
that
was
work?
a fan of. And actually, when I was first talking about, even though I'm going to tell you about John Burnham Schwartz, I actually meant the self-editing of, like,
Oh, got it.
going, oh, I don't need that. Oh, wow, it works so great when I don't have all that. Oh, here comes a baby.
You're
I
so
really, really
self-aware to be able to do that, Griffin. I don't know that everybody's that self-aware.
it comes from making movies too.
Yeah.
And being in an editing room, as you'll shoot all this stuff and then you go, God, that look sort of says it all.
Yeah.
It's not dissimilar on the page. But I was very fortunate to have, after all of my Zooms, which is while we were shooting This Is Us,
Mm.
I had a day on my day off of like 15 different publishers who were very, very interested. And one of them was from Penguin, which I'm a total snob, and Penguin, and who doesn't,
Right.
paperbacks and the history and everything like that. But then the added treat was that their editor there, who wanted to work on my book, was a novelist called John Burnham Schwartz, who I coincidentally, I didn't even know he was going to be on the call. I'd read 2 of his books, and was a big fan of his. So, and also he had a Los Angeles background, and it was an incredibly productive relationship that I also learned a great deal from, of like I'd have a simile and he'd be going through, I'd send him like 50, 60 pages at a time. And then we go back over it and he'd say about a simile, he goes, the thing about similes, if it's not unfucking believable, don't use it.
Don't use it.
There's nothing worse than a
Yeah.
half-assed simile. Hey, so do you think this is an amazing simile? I go, no, never mind.
So how long was that process once he was involved with it? Like, what does that back and forth look like?
It was like ongoing. Over the year and a half, 2 years, I came in well under my deadline.
That's great.
And so by the time, so he was reading it chronologically as I was writing it and reading all the things that, that didn't end up in the book, that I kind of didn't even have to be told, oh, this shouldn't go in the book, or you either have that one or that one, but you can't have both.
Right.
So we were always on
So
the
he
same
was
page.
kind of in it with you as you were going, like as you were
Oh,
getting.
absolutely.
Got it. So it wasn't like you
Yeah. I always had
handed
being
it
first
over.
time. Yeah, being my first book, I kind of the only thing I was worried about would be that I would expend, 200-300 pages going down a road and then being told, I don't think you noticed something here, but
Oh,
you have a spine that is very rickety. And then I'd have to go over it again and look at it all over again.
yeah.
I wanted to share the thread I was on, in big chunks.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I feel like that's rare though. You're the first person I've spoken to who that was the process. It's usually that there's like this complete piece that is handed over and then
Yeah. I
you know?
mean, I was certainly offered that option. John said, listen, go away for as long as you want and hand it to me and we'll dive into it. But, I also grew up around writers, and it was right after when I turned in, I think, my first 100 pages or something.
Mhm.
Uh, he said, you know what? So anyway, let's set up a Zoom and we can go. I went, no, 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 no. I'm coming to Penguin Random House office, and we're going to sit in a conference room, and we're going to have pages stretched out, and we'll have different color markers, just like writers do.
This is amazing.
Just like the people, I want the full experience
You're
here.
so romantic, Griffin.
Screw this Zoom crap.
That's
Um,
awesome. How many
yeah,
colors of markers did you guys get out?
yeah. It was, and he, by the way, he's also old school in that he would print out my pages, then he would make editorial, those little designs of
Yeah.
like I'd have, what the hell does that thing that looks like a sperm cell look like? And what is this? And what is uh and then he would take photos of each page and from in Xerox them or whatever. And so we would work off hard copies. So when the notes I wanted to apply, I would take these chunks of paper and then type them in. It was very pre-internet.
That's very cool. That sounds like a lovely way to operate because it would seem hard to me to like look at a document that someone has marked up and understand exactly the nuance of what they're asking for with, subtle changes on something, right? It's like, but if you see it on the page, it feels different, it seems like.
Absolutely. And then you could ask about it, and then you can go, all right, I'm doing this. I can't remember what you said about this. What was the problem here? Then you go, oh, I forget what my problem was too. Never mind. Keep going.
That's the best. That's so great. Well, okay. So in terms of process, you came in under time. You had a very old school process, great relationship with the editor. When you have the complete book, what kind of control do you have over, and I know this all sounds kind of crazy, but I'm so curious about the whole process of it all, like the font, the page and how the page feels, the book cover, like what participation do you get in all of those choices, or is that something that's just sort of handed to you?
No, no, in my case, there was a tremendous involvement. They really wanted me to feel good about the cover going out. Now, you know, having come from movies as both a producer and a director, that is, this pleasing the producer director isn't the first motivation
No.
for putting up, and I've seen some pretty awful posters in my time that don't look anything like the thing we spent years working on.
Yeah.
And you have that fight. But I had an idea. Um, they weren't sure what it should be for the cover, which I like their honesty. It was like, we need to just sort of sit with this. But you think too, if you have any ideas, and
Mm.
and I did have an idea that I pitched to them that they thought was wonderful, and the art department ran with it. And it was a picture, in the book I referred to Henry Rousseau's jungle drawings.
Hmm.
And so I said, what about taking a picture of me as a kid and put me in the jungle like a wild child, a Maurice Sendak kind of a thing? He said, fabulous, fabulous. And so it goes, and it was, it went through the different departments. Oh, this is great. This is great. And then they said, we're having a big meeting and we're going to talk about it. And so I got a report after the meeting, and John goes, do you remember how everyone was going, that's really great. That's really great. He goes, yeah. So we're in the meeting and somebody pipes up and goes, I'm not so sure I like this.
Oh no.
And then everybody, I know, me neither, me neither, me neither.
Oh God, it just took one person to admit it.
Yes. And um, and then they came up, well, actually the John Burnham Shorts, my editor, who also came up with the title, by the way. I was helpless coming up with the title.
Mm.
Of the Friday Afternoon Club. I think the art department or someone came up with the picture that is on the cover of a Christmas Day event that we would have people who had nowhere to go on Christmas come to our
Wow.
house.
So this is,
Yes.
wow.
And so many of the people in the book are on that cover.
Yeah, I
Even
know,
though
it's
that
incredible.
like 1969 or something.
Wow.
So, and then I look at it, I mean, you can imagine how many times I've seen that. It still catches my eye, and I just
Oh yeah.
like look at it. It's just so alive, that picture. And it was taken by, we did that every year. So I have actually a whole series of over the years of different people who'd come to the house with one year it was Francois Truffaut, who came not speaking a word of English,
Wow.
brought by a publicist because he was doing Day for Night, and which I had just seen and tried to talk to him about, which I wrote about, which didn't end up in the book. Anyway, so but I didn't dream that picture would be the cover. And now I just look at it, I go, God, it makes me feel so good every time I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, you can feel there's so much going on in everyone's lives. Like
Yeah.
you feel this like vibrance in each person and complexity of whatever is happening in that moment. Like I don't know
Yeah.
what, but something's going on with everybody.
It's true.
Right.
It's true.
It's not like a typical family photo where you're like, oh, everyone's slightly dead in their eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
There's like some real shit going on here.
Yeah.
Well, one of the
Uh,
things that I was super fascinated that you explored, and I'm sure I'm fascinated just because I'm also an actor and a director and a producer, but was just this idea of imposter syndrome. Like you kind of circle back around that at several different times in your own journey. And I'm curious what not just that it existed for you, but what your take on it existing in general for artists is. Like, what is it that you think kind of fuels that in all of us, that we can't quite accept our own space in the industry or our own thing that we have to offer in some way?
Well, it's an ongoing struggle. I think it's something that, without sounding too self-congratulatory to you or myself, I think you have to be a truly creative person
Mm,
to feel that way, to be haunted by that, to because you're driven to make sure, it's real. And,
right.
we're dealing with such personal things. We put ourselves out on the line, never more so than in a memoir, but, as an actor and director,
Yeah.
you put it out there, and there is this thing in the back of your head of like going, is somebody going to call you out on, and or find a false moment, or
Yeah.
that you've directed a scene and it's not true, and that you've written a thing that doesn't come from the heart. And I kind of think um I kind of think if you're really honest with yourself, even if it kind of hurts a little bit,
Yeah.
then it's real, and people are going to respond to it. Um I was very influenced by the writers in my family, because they were like that. They were very tough on themselves, and they would
Mm,
write. My uncle was hilarious writer, John Gregory Dunne, and he would write things about himself and about his childhood, and you know, um, that were so blisteringly honest, yet also funny,
right.
because they were so. And I found that very influential, and liberating to me. And my aunt would write about, I'm going to divorce my husband John, and then John would edit it. So
My
my dad
God.
would, yeah, and then and my dad talked about his struggles with alcohol and being a big ass phony, and then trying, um, and his evolution of being a person, a whole person, but still struggling. The epitaph is that carries us all is, my father saying to me once after some argument, "What can I say, kid? I'm just a work in progress."
Yeah.
And I think, going back to your original thing, that I think we about the imposter thing is, I think we, need to sort of give ourselves a little bit of a break and just consider ourselves works in progress, and know that we're constantly, I think, we're just moving targets, just trying to, do the best work that we can do as honestly as we can do, and and be open to failure as much as whatever we think success is.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you're saying that, it was making me think about a moment that I had with a cinematographer I worked with when I was making my first feature. And I just remember him saying, I can't remember what happened that caused this, but probably something along the lines of me doubting something. And he said, you just have to realize that every film or every piece of art is just a time capsule. It's a time capsule of exactly the best you can do right now. And
Mhm.
it's like you just have to picture it. It's like you're a little kid burying your favorite sticker and your comb and your Barbie and your whatever that you want to dig up in 10 years and go, oh my God, look where I was at. Like that's so, and he was
Yeah,
like, you just have to have that tenderness for just accepting where you're at. And so that I think about that a lot. It does help me sometimes, but it's, I feel like the more we all do work in the industry, the more pressure it is to be like, do I have something to say? Am I saying something important? Am I doing something that's honest? It's like, it's just, you can really spiral and all that.
absolutely. And that leads me to what that's still on the same thing we're talking about is, and you might have found this on your first film. I found it on the very first thing I directed, and I found it in this book, and I found it in the very first thing I produced, a movie at 23, how easy it was, in that I didn't know what to be afraid of. I didn't
Mm,
know. So I didn't really spend a lot of time stopping to ask myself deep questions because it was new to me. What I will be doing with the imposter theory and you know, and the questioning myself would be a second book. And
right.
that's, like which I don't imagine will be a memoir. I'd like to be writing fiction, but that sophomore effort, it's called,
Yeah.
is much tougher. Everybody thinks the first thing is no, it's the second one. And that will be uh I know that'll be much harder
Yeah.
because our first efforts is in my case, it's always been like just shit just falls into place and you don't sort of question it and everybody loves it. And then let's go on to your second one. And then, ooh, okay,
Yeah,
fine.
because you don't
Yeah,
have the pressure of expectation on the first one. The first one is just
exactly.
whatever it is, it is. But then if people like it, then it's like, oh, well, can you do it again? It's
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
just the worst. Another thing that you talk a lot about is well, just I'm trying to think of exactly how you phrased it. Something about your sort of shame of privilege of the way that you were raised a little bit of just like you got to a place where you were like, I wish I knew what it was like to be like a family in Kansas that had, where the kids went to prom and had sort of normal that you didn't have, I don't know, Scorsese coming for dinner or whatever, it's like
Yeah.
so um and so I just thought that was super interesting because I feel like 99% of the world would say, "Oh my God, how cool would it be if Sean Connery saved me from drowning? And how cool would it be if all these people came to my house?" And you have the exact opposite reaction, which is that you grew up with all that sort of bigger than life stuff around you, and there was this real craving for a rooted sense of I don't want to say normal because I don't know what normal really is, but sort of center of the
Yeah.
road a little bit more, you know?
Yeah. It at a fairly early age, it sort of struck me the ridiculousness of this kind of privilege, and the way uh, Beverly Hills, which was famous at that time for the Beverly Hillbillies, and saying I was from Beverly Hills, you'd have to draw it out of me under torture. But when it did finally come out, they'd go, "Oh, do you know the Beverly Hillbillies?"
Oh
And
no.
and then some decade later, 90210 didn't help matters.
Right.
And so to be from like a fictitious town, um, that's all about wealth and how much money you have, and the all that, um, which just struck me as really phony and sort of silly, and it embarrassed me to say I was from such a place. And I, at a very early age, I really wanted to go. If I couldn't go to a high school in Kansas where I was not destined to be from, and you know get put a pin on the girl and take her to the prom dance and have a bonfire before the big football game.
Yeah.
No, I went to an all boys school with coats, ties, and whippings, and weird, Dickensian kind of horror show. And so I from a very early age, I couldn't wait to get away from that identity and go to New York and sort of create my own and just be, start out as a young actor and, see if I, you know, could make it on my own and not have to go the route of getting a television series in Los Angeles, which there were no good television series as far, and I was always a snob about that anyway. Um, and so I just didn't want to take that route.
Yeah.
And and I would rarely, when I can't went to New York, then I went to the neighborhood playhouse. Um, uh, I would just say Los Angeles. I'm from LA, but okay, fine.
Right. Just
Just
skip the Beverly Hills of it all.
those of it all. Oh, what part of LA? Well, you would Western LA, the
Yeah.
West.
Oh,
And
God. And it's so interesting because, like, I've lived in LA for 20 years now, and more than 20 years. And it never occurred to me the difference of saying like, oh, I'm from Los Angeles, or I live in West Hollywood, or wherever, compared to like, I'm from Beverly Hills. I've never lived in Beverly Hills, so that's never. I did live in Beverly Hills adjacent momentarily. But like, it never occurred to me the baggage that would come with that. But of course, that totally makes sense. It's so interesting.
Yeah. Well, just you're from a place that everyone has an impression of, everyone, without
Yeah.
having ever been.
Yeah. Wow. It's so
Mhm.
crazy. And was there a point growing up where you were like, was there a clear point of I am an actor? Obviously you were around the industry. You've got so many writers in your family. Your dad's a producer, executive, all these things. It's like all that stuff is going on around you. But was there a clear moment of like, this is for sure what I'm going to do?
Yeah, I thought that when I was in high school, uh, I I was an avid reader of a Rolling Stone magazine and Hunter Thompson. And I loved the journalism of my uncle in particular. Jones was still a little obtuse to me a bit, but I love and Tom Wolfe, and I love that sort of first person writer putting themselves in the story they were covering, kind of that was both funny and had a lot of edge. So that was my thought, and I knew I'd have to, I probably have to go to college just to really get my writing bones down and maybe go to a journalism college and study journalism. And that was my plan. And in the 10th grade, of which I should have been in the 11th, I was held back. This drama teacher at the school I was at, the boarding school, all boys boarding school, convinced me to audition for Zoo Story, which is a one-act play by Edward Albee.
Yeah.
And and I got it. And I didn't want to be an actor. I thought LA, Beverly Hills, Hollywood movie star, phony, phony, phony. Well, all it took was doing this play and this playing Jerry, this unbelievable part, and I was hooked. I was a goner. Um, and my next part was going to be, and I went, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to be an
Oh,
actor.
wow.
And then the next part was I was playing Iago, and I immediately went from being Joe actor on campus, and people would watch my rehearsals for Iago, and I knew I was on fire. But then the night before the performance, I was kicked out of school for
Oh
smoking
my
pot,
God.
and the headmaster principal, begged me to say I wasn't doing it, but the person I was smoking pot with was,
Oh,
which I wouldn't do, and they kicked me out. And I never got to play Iago, and I never got to go to college. I knew I getting kicked out of college, getting kicked out of high school in the 10th grade, certainly, and not being a great student scholastically did not bode well for any real college. So I moved to New York a year later, to be an actor. If I hadn't been kicked out and hadn't done Zoo Story, I probably would have gravitated toward writing.
oh, crazy.
But I definitely when I decided to be an actor, I was all in. That's
Yeah.
what I dreamed and hoped for.
And so, I mean, I assume that if you were writing a book right now, you wouldn't tell me. So I won't ask you that. But do you feel like you have some ideas percolating of what a novel might be, or?
Yeah, I do, and I do, and I will probably sort of break myself, break in the take the novel, another book out of it, and just sort of. I love short stories. I love
Mm.
reading short stories.
Yeah.
I love short movies when they're done right. I find that the skill it takes to tell a story, in 25 pages and a movie in 25 minutes, is just a art in itself. And so I'm kind of, you know, I'm thinking along those lines.
Nice.
But quite honestly, I've been so busy. This book has been beyond my wildest expectations, and I love to travel, and I'm invited all over the world, and I'm a travel slut, and so I'll show up with an opening of an envelope.
That's
When
amazing.
when you write a book and you're out, talking about it, uh, it's so different than when you're promoting a movie or any other medium because you have company.
Mm.
Uh, and you go to the bar afterwards with the actors you're with, or you're all staying in the same hotel, whatever it is.
Oh, of course.
But this is a solo Willy Loman kind of flight.
Yeah.
I've gone from when I was on the tour, on a book tour, and it took me all over America and then to London and Belfast and Dublin. And, I was on my own. I would just have my suitcase and, go from flight to flight and hotel to check in to self check in.
Oh my
And,
God. Well,
and it was,
tell me a little bit about what a book tour looks like. Like, do they have you read excerpts? Are you being interviewed nonstop? Or how does that work?
well, first of all, I was told when I turned in the book and everybody had read it at Penguin, the first thing they said was, "We're going to do what we haven't done in a long time, which is sending you on a book tour."
Oh, wow.
And, because of money and, with Zoom and, it usually happens that you promote, digitally. And so what they did is you get it like a schedule in a different city. And I've also, I've read about book tours. Read David Foster Wallace's stories, being on the book tour and being met I was never once met at the airport by anyone, but he did. He got to be met. But my aunt wrote famously about the ingredients she packs before she goes on a book tour, and the baby oil and the bottle of scotch and all that kind of stuff. And so I had a romanticism about it already. Um, but you go and you kind of like it's it's so weird. You go to the designated either bookstore or theater or uh and you meet your Q&A person. In San Francisco, it was Tobias Wolff, which was one of my favorite writers and a great honor, who
That's
I'd only
cool.
met once in my and it's sometimes and you'd have really interesting other writers whose work you have read volunteer to speak to you in front of
That's got
you
to be
know
cool. I mean, that's got to be a
it's
highlight.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then you're there in whatever city or whatever, and you're speaking on a stage, and you're speaking about things that are kind of like the book, alternately really funny and then really, really sad.
Yeah.
And which is which was it was difficult emotionally. It was like I would get a catch in my throat sometimes in public, not tears or anything, but people could say, "Oh boy."
Yeah.
I go, "Oh shit, how am I going to do this?" But then I thought when I was saying earlier, um, I'm talking about things I really care about, besides issues, and that's what people are responding to in the book. Besides, all uh, the 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 alcoholism, suicide, and all that kind of stuff. They're responding to the issues that are in the book, and how it affected my parents' life, all of our lives.
Yeah.
So I went, okay, well then if my throat catches, go with it. I can't control it. It's like Tourette's or something, and it's never at like, oh, and then she was, uh, you know, it's always like I'll be talking about Carrie Fisher, about a really funny moment,
Yeah.
who was and then this weird, like almost presence of Carrie or some thing
Wow.
will go. miss her in this
Oh,
millisecond so
wow.
much. And I won't even
Oh,
see it. I go, oh, take a beat and then go on talking, So it's all, and that happens. That's what, goes on in a book tour for me
wow.
anyway.
I mean, that's wild though. That's so what a profound experience to be feeling the presence of the people that you've shared the pages with.
Yeah.
Actually. That's
Yeah,
wild.
and I felt it when I was writing it too.
Yeah.
Um, it's an extension of that. It reminds me of the way I felt when I was writing it,
Yeah.
just, that I wasn't, I felt I had company. I could feel it.
Yeah. Well, I miss getting to hang out with you on set, Griffin.
It's too. So, and you made your movie and you were, oh God, so much life has happened.
I know so many things have happened, but the way I always close this interview is just by asking if there's a piece of advice you were ever given that you feel might be helpful to our listeners. And it could be about writing or not writing or anything, but just
Sure.
anything that comes to mind that you feel like is sort of like a North Star for you.
Well, advice I would give to anyone who's starting out in a profession that they really want to be in, particularly acting,
Yeah.
is to not say no, to not
Mm,
overthink if a job is going to alter your future negatively or positively, and to embrace the fact that no one is paying attention as much as you are about yourself.
right.
And there's a great liberation in that. So you can go out and, learn stuff and through your mistakes. And, you know, people think, particularly even more so with the internet and,
Yeah.
social media, that everything's recorded, that I'm so glad I didn't have that in my life, but still I did have a fear of failing
Yeah.
earlier than I should have a fear of failing. Um, and making mistakes. The mistakes are the good part. That's my
I love that. Well,
today.
Griffin, I can't wait for your next book, no matter what it ends up being.
Whatever it is.
I
See
mean,
you.
you just have such a beautiful way with words. It's the way that you observe the world is pretty spectacular, and I don't feel like I have a way to articulate it for our readers. They have to trust me and go read your book. But just the way you take in the world and describe it, and the way that you look back on things and let them echo, see how it echoes through your life. It's really delightful, and I'm sorry that it's taken me interviewing you about a book for us to have time to talk since I saw you last on set. Are you in
Well,
LA?
I'm thrilled
Can
with.
I see you?
Well, I hope I see you when I'm back, and I'm just in LA whenever that'll be. I have no idea, but I'm just thrilled with all the wonderful things that have been happening in your life,
Thank you.
and I'm so happy to see you. I've been really looking forward to it, seeing you, even this image of you wherever the hell you are.
I'm in LA, in my little office in LA. I've rented myself an office with my
Oh,
little
good.
production company name on the door.
That's another piece of advice.
Yes.
For particularly for a writer, um, is to sometimes when you spend money, the money comes back. And if you make an investment, and getting your own office is a really good one. It doesn't have to, be bankrupt you or anything like that.
Sure.
Actually, making a commitment where you're paying rent on a place where you're supposed to deliver, to
Yeah.
pay for it, is really is really motivating.
Yeah, it's interesting because I realized I had kind of avoided it for a long time because in my mind I thought, oh, well, a job might come up and then I'm wasting the money, right? So that's what
That's what I'm talking about. That's the now
and
part.
yeah, and then I realized, but if a job comes up, I'm going to be making enough money that it's okay to be spending that money.
There
I
you
was
go.
like, what am I doing? I got to just do
There you
this.
go. Well, that's great.
All right. Well, enjoy your travels and
All right.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I just adore you. I'm so grateful that you did this.
Adore you too. Bye, Jen.